kuyenda kuharare toda kugara kuharare toda kuyenda kuharare toda kugara kuharare toda kuyenda kuharare toda kugara.
Hi everybody, welcome back to Africa for Dummies. This is episode 3. And joined as always with me is Mr. Zenge. How are you doing, man?
Hello, everybody.
How you doing, man? Episode 3.
Yeah, we're very happy to have everybody listening to us. It's amazing how some people are responding, and
Yeah, and if you're listening to this on whichever platform you're listening to, please give us a little follow, share the podcast to whoever you think would be interested in this, and leave us a like. And on top of that, follow our Africa for Dummies Spotify playlist where we specially handpick African music.
Right. So today, episode 3, whatever.
Tres.
I mean, Africa is multilingual.
Yeah.
Multiple European languages. Irony.
Yeah.
We are going to be talking to our co-host, that is Mr. Nathan,
Yeah.
who is an agribusiness student /
Yeah.
specialist / enthusiast on the 3Ds. That is the name of our third podcast today. We're going to be talking about how African migrant labor tends to be dirty, degrading, and dangerous, and the politics around that specifically. So Nathan wrote a paper on illegal African immigrants, and particularly in the agriculture sector and employment around that. So Nathan,
Well, let me sorry to cut you. Let me just give a disclaimer first of all. This was written as a requirement for a certain class, first of all. So I'm not like a professional in this field. I think it's just great to discuss and some of the findings that I found when going through some of this research. And initially it kind of started as this thing where I was just looking at how farms in Africa handle human resource management. But then my professor pulled me to the side when I first sent him my draft, and he goes like, Nathan, you have a lot of common sense, use it. Because it was just all over. It was all over the place. It was just, I was talking about, you have a lot of common sense, use it. So I had a lot of because I was all over the place, that sort of a thing. So I kind of looked at what's going on with migration, and particularly in Africa, and also focused more on South African agriculture. So just a small disclaimer. I'm not necessarily a professional. Maybe you guys are professional, so you can definitely send in your responses.
We will be very interested in listening to more expert opinions. If you have any particular views on the issue, and it's a very broad, sometimes controversial issue. So Nathan, we basically borrowed the title from what you said and what you term as the 3Ds, which basically is the dirty, degrading, and dangerous. Please explain to us why this is the case with undocumented immigrants, especially Africans, when they go to Europe.
Oh, okay. 3D, dirty, dangerous, degrading, agriculture labor. Yeah. So just to explain what those three terms mean. So you've got the dirty, of course, agriculture labor. Like you're working on a farm, it's dirty. You're obviously going to get dirty. It's quite dangerous, very dangerous, because people tend to have back pains when they go out in the field. And also the chemicals that are used in agriculture can be very dangerous. I remember reading that some women who were exposed to these chemicals reportedly had children with some deformities because of these chemicals. So these chemicals are bad, and sometimes there's some reports that they've caused some people have cancer. And some of these workers, especially
bad safety standards, then.
Yeah, very, very, yeah. And in South Africa, as I mentioned earlier, it's actually a very serious issue, because a lot of workers are not protected from these chemicals. And even in Europe itself, when they come over, I think there were some documentaries I watched done by Al Jazeera, that showed videos that these workers basically, they go in no mask, no nothing, like there's no protective gear, and they just go in and spray with these chemicals. So typically migrant workers basically go into these areas, and they find themselves in these jobs because they don't necessarily have the paperwork. First of all, they're not legal. They're
Not covered.
illegal.
Yeah.
They're not documented.
Yeah.
One. So secondly, they don't have any. You don't have any formalized skill, I should say. You could come
Right.
and you can be a doctor, but then like it's not formalized, you know. So it's like
You won't be recognized anywhere
it's
with.
not recognized essentially. So you're just coming into Europe and you have to find a job where somebody doesn't care about this. People don't care about documents. People don't care. They just want to get
Yeah.
cheap labor, that sort of thing. That's why people tend to go into these fields in particular.
Yeah, and I'm glad you actually mentioned the issue about doctors and this fact that they're not covered and they'll probably end up going to cheap labor and the different types of jobs. Because what I also wanted to ask was what type of migrants actually go into the farming sector as illegal um, migrants in Europe or in South Africa,
Mm,
and why would a doctor, for example, why would someone with such
mm,
such a high job qualification skill, what benefit do they see in getting these low wage jobs, and why agriculture?
mm. Well, the type of people that go into these jobs vary, like from a teacher to a farm worker, like somebody that's a subsistence farmer. So it really does vary. As for why I think your second.
Yeah, the second question was basically why do they accept? What are the benefits of getting a low wage job? Why do they accept
I
low wage
mean,
jobs?
it's still the job may still be low wage for that country, but there is a significant income differential that exists between the source country, which is the country where the migrant is coming from,
Yeah,
and to the country that they're also going to, which is the host country. But
right.
the thing is, it's important to note that when it comes to why migrants decide to leave, um, it's easy to just go and say that it's simply because of income differentials, but it's actually very, very complex to
Mm,
really boil down to what exactly causes them to move. Because um the it's easy to just say income different. There are a variety of reasons. Some reasons could be to join family. Other reasons are to
join family in the area that
in
they
the
are
area.
going to
Exactly.
migrate.
There's that. There's also education. It's a number of reasons. So it can't just be it's
It can't
I
just be
try
about
to
job and
yeah, I try my
hiring.
best not to just say, oh, it's simply because of money. So
Yeah.
there are a variety of reasons that push someone to move. And keep in mind that these journeys are not cheap, eh? It's not
Right.
something that's easy. And I read
That
somewhere that
one through the Sahel, right? The
yeah,
from for example, from Burkina Faso through to Libya. That's another story.
that's
I think
yeah, yeah.
I think almost modern day slavery that's going on in
in
Libya.
Libya. Yeah, I read somewhere that it costs more for people to migrate from Africa to Europe than it does for someone in South America to migrate to the United States of America. So
Crazy.
the cost of migration is still high, and people still take on that journey. So I think I think
What factors into the costs of migration? Do you have to pay middlemen or something? Like
yeah,
what is it?
definitely there's
Because you're obviously not flying, you're not going by boat, you're not using an actual legal route to it.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's a lot. I think most of the cost goes to middlemen. I'm not too sure about that. I need to
yeah,
definitely go on and check that out. But yeah, I think I remember watching a documentary where they say that middlemen they do break bank, and uh you know these boats, all those types of things, like they do make it's created an industry. And also the movement for migrants tends to be like most of the migration. I think majority of the migration that exists in Africa tends to be from rural to rural, and also sometimes now I think there's some
within
study,
Africa,
yeah, within Africa. So rural, no, sorry, rural to urban. Sorry about that. And then now they're starting to see a lot of rural to rural, which is somebody moving from a rural area that's less well off, moving on to another rural area that's a little bit better. And also like a lot of small scale farmers, or should I say subsistence farmers, or rural households
yes,
send people to urban areas or to other better rural areas as a way to kind of diversify their income.
sort of having one leg into the more well
Yeah,
off area.
it's
But
a risk management strategy. So the basically, even when the FAO did their research, they found that households that didn't have some sort of a relative or family member that stayed in an urban area, they were caught in what's called the hunger trap because they were less food secure than people that did. And
Our listeners, the FAO is the UN agency
oh,
responsible
sorry.
for food and agriculture.
Yeah,
Right.
sorry, the
Yeah.
Food and Agriculture Organization. So a lot of families in rural areas use this as a risk management strategy. So you send someone to an urban area to kind of be this source of extra source of income in case anything were to happen. So you definitely do see
And even like drought, I suppose,
yeah.
you know, with recent bouts of drought across parts of Africa,
Mhm.
you probably find that people would want to diversify their income, knowing that there could be one day when there's no
But
food
then
sufficiency.
this strategy is not only like for African. I mean, even American farmers do it too. They when you look at the small scale farmers in America, most of them have other jobs. It's not like they're just solely surviving on farming. Like
Yeah,
a lot of them make losses. Keep that in mind. Like a lot, it's just that they have greater access to finance than some of our farmers in Africa do.
balance.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, go ahead.
that's actually interesting that you mentioned that, especially going back to earlier what you just said about the diversity
Mm,
of reasons that people would leave.
mm,
I wanted to ask, why is there such a diversity? And now I'm looking at the wage payments in the illegal migrant market. Why is there such a diversity of wage payments? Because you listed, I think, three different wage payments and
mhm.
ways in which undocumented immigrants get paid. Just explain that to us.
Yeah, the International Labor Organization basically listed three methods of payment. The first one was I think the peace wage, which is an older method that used to exist in the past, basically. And they peace wages are simply where you get paid after you do the job. So I tell you, going to collect, you collect all these things, and I'll pay you fixed rate. I'll pay you this amount of money once the job is done.
And
Uh,
who decides how much? That's the just is that just up to the employer on how much they should pay them on the piece wage?
yeah, I
Like,
mean, it's definitely up to the employer because first of all, you're an illegal migrant, so it's not easy to find. It's not easy for you to find work. Of course, if you're in an area where there are lots of other farms, like it gives the workers more options to choose. But in South Africa, for example, there's something called they have a paternalistic sort of relationship with their farm workers. So it's like paternalistic is where like the relationship is almost like father and son or father and child.
basically keeping you and being responsible for your welfare.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if that's the same in Europe, but I know in South Africa that does exist.
So you're more or less at the mercy of your employer
Yeah,
if
to a
you're
certain
in this arrangement. Yeah,
yeah, from what I saw in
that's
the South African situation, yeah, like a lot of farm workers are basically at the mercy of the farmer. So even when they want to go somewhere, they have to, of course, they have to ask and tell them. And for the farmer, it's great because they enjoy having the worker close by. And I think one thing that farmers or any employers try to mitigate is absenteeism. So having that relationship kind of it removes that absenteeism sort of
like you're
factor. So
leaving.
yeah, exactly. So absenteeism is today I'm not coming, boss. I'm tired.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I guess there's pros and cons, but obviously there's also the issue of how the extent to which that paternalistic thing can be good because you can be almost captive. So that's
Yeah,
page,
yeah, yeah.
which you described as having.
Peace where somebody you get paid after the job is done. It
Okay,
used to be common in the past, but now it still exists, but it
that's
exists in areas where quality is not the main priority. So if quality is not a significant priority, then you do that. But then once minimum wage got introduced, you
yeah.
start hourly wages became more popular.
That's the
So
second. That's the
that's the
second.
second. Yeah. So hourly wages is where I pay you by the
Payment.
hour. The hour that you work, I pay you for that. So
Okay.
those are the ones that you find more commonly, and also salary. I think I've seen that in Africa as well. Like you get paid at the end of a month or whatever.
Does this
However
have?
it is.
So we've got piece wage, which is
Mhm.
more or less your employer is kind of keeping you, and you do the job and you get paid for whatever job you're doing as it
Mm-hmm.
comes.
Yeah.
And then there's the hourly slash minimum wage. Am I right?
Yeah. Hourly.
So the hourly slash minimum wage payment system,
Mm.
that's a much more widely used one, right? Are there any benefits in particular that distinguish the hourly wage one to the piece wage one for the farmer or
For
the employer? But I mean the employee.
I think, I mean, at the end of the day, like, even when it comes to piece rate, like, the farmer still has to figure out a way. I mean, the farmer has to still figure out a way of paying the if it's regulated, of course. Farmer still needs to figure out a way to pay his workers at least the minimum wage, even when it's piece rate. Like, it still has to reach the minimum wage. I think the hourly one, it also takes into account like absenteeism. So for the farmer, it's kind of a benefit, like, and it's also used where quality is a major is a priority. And
The piece one wasn't that much to do with quality, but this
no,
one,
piece wages are used where quality is not, because there was, I think there was one farm where she, I think there was it was in a paper, and it was a lady, and she basically was trying to figure out how to reduce her costs, and she realized that she had like too many workers, and also additionally, like, some of the workers, like, they didn't care that much about the
it didn't do much.
quality. Yeah, so it's yeah, it tends to be used where there's quality is not the biggest issue, just picking, doing something, and all that type of thing. But
Okay.
hourly wages used when these things are, what do you call this, where quality is a bit, where quality is also important. But I think the difficulty for illegal immigrants, for them, is figuring out a way for this to be, um because it's not documented, right?
Yeah, let's figure sort of a way for it.
Exactly. Figure, like, you as a worker, it's very difficult for you to take this court to case. I mean, this case to court. It's very difficult for you to, if you're not paid well. Like, for
There's
example,
not much room for legal action if something
there's
goes wrong.
no room, because who's going to represent you? You're
Yeah.
not legal, you know. So it's difficult for the illegal migrant, because it's difficult to even get represented. If the farmer can just say, look, I'm not paying you guys anymore, or something like that, and there's nothing you can do. Like, I remember there was a situation in Spain where a particular group of people, I think migrants coming from Morocco, were complaining about the situation in that Spanish area, and they just simply replaced them. They're like, "Man, you guys are."
They can't really do anything about it
Yeah,
once
there's
they're
nothing you can do. They just say, "Oh, you guys want to make noise? Then we're going to get the Polish workers. They're going to, you know,
wow.
they're going to do this for us." Then
How the Africans in with the Polish. Okay.
yeah, it's like, what are you going to do about that? You know,
Yeah.
so it's one of the major concerns for illegal migrants, like, apart from the various ones like housing and
Yeah.
that sort of a thing. So it's one of the issues for sure.
So
Wages.
we got piece wage, and then we got the hourly slash minimum wage, and then what's the
Yeah.
third one?
Salary, the common one, which is basically I pay you at the end of the month, or at the
Uh,
end of, yeah.
Is that one recognized or it's also undocumented?
That one I'm not too sure.
Um, would the quality of the
Mhm.
job also be important, and
Mhm.
uh, would it be more common
I
for
think
African migrants in Europe or African migrants within Africa, like
mm,
Africa in South Africa, for
I think
example?
the salary one is used for workers that they try to keep on for a long time.
Mm, okay,
So, which is
permanent.
also, yeah, so which is very rare to see actually. One of the things about agriculture, like farm labor, is that you don't, especially as an illegal immigrant, like, it's very hard for you to work your way up.
Are most of the jobs temporary or permanent?
Most, yeah, most of them are temporary, because you, for example, in the livestock sector, it's mechanized, so they don't really need that much. There's not that huge demand for labor in, in livestock production, and then also in grain production, it's also mechanized, highly mechanized. So it's not, there's not a huge, there's not much of a demand for unskilled labor. So it's in the, I think, I don't know if the crop or horticulture sector where they do need the labor to harvest,
Mm.
and in some African countries, maybe the planting issue is also there. So, and also certain other tasks, but you only need them when it's like it's called seasonal labor. So you just need them based on the season, like oh, it's time to harvest. Call a certain person who in South Africa they basically send their permanent labor. They tell them go to your neighborhood, tell people we need a group of
Just
people.
actually go and scout
Yeah,
of
to go
people.
and scout and say we need people to
There are people hanging around in the periphery waiting for
yeah,
this, then go and come back.
basically go and find this amount of workers, bring them here, and
Yeah.
that sort of a thing. Then once they're done, bye, don't need you anymore. That sort
Wow.
of a thing. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So that brings me to my other question, especially when you mentioned how they basically use them and dispose of them as and
Hmm.
when needed, and how, for example, in Spain, in South Africa, in other parts of Europe, how workers are not really unionized, they're not documented. So basically, the employers can do pretty much as they
Hmm.
wish. Do you think illegal immigrants should be more incorporated into trade unions? And what's this? You mentioned in your paper that there's a strategy of legalization in some countries. What does this mean, and what do you think about incorporating them into trade unions? Because you also mentioned something to do with mechanization, which also affects people. Um, as we all know, the last decade was full of people complaining about globalization,
Yeah.
mechanizing everything, especially in
Hmm.
agriculture. Well, and that upset a lot of domestic people. So
Hmm.
yeah, expand on this. What do you think about them being part of trade unions? Uh,
Um. Well,
yeah,
when it comes to trade unions, like in South Africa, I'll keep mentioning South Africa because it was a country that I focused on in the paper.
yeah,
But a lot of like farmers don't like trade unions, as obviously, like they don't like them. So they do as much as they can to create incentives for the farm workers to not join a trade union. And even the farm workers themselves sometimes don't like trade unions because sometimes they involve some sort of fee or something like that. So sometimes they don't actually go and join. And then
so you
also,
know themselves that could possibly benefit from the trade unions don't like it because of the fees involved in being part of the trade
yeah,
union.
sometimes some of the fees that are involved, and then also they know that the farmers don't
Yeah,
like the trade union, so they're like they try to stay away from them.
and keep
Then
in mind that from the if you're an undocumented immigrant, you want to be on the best possible side with your employer, and then you add on the trade unions.
exactly, and sometimes like keep in mind that these a common strategy that's used. I don't know if it's used in Europe, but when an illegal migrant comes to a farm, the employer, the farmer, basically tends to. It's very common for the farmer to take their passport to ensure that he basically,
Is that even legal?
it
Okay.
exists. So they take it. I think it's also a way of ensuring absenteeism, ensuring that there's no absenteeism, and also I guess in case of any thefts or something like that, that sort of a thing. So they actually keep their. Sometimes I've seen reports where they do keep their passport. So you can't say anything as an illegal. You can't do anything. So even when it comes to this, I think it's also difficult to create a trade union for illegal migrants because
Trade unions actually even want illegal migrant labor to
oh,
be part of their union.
that's that's a very good question. I think
Yeah,
that actually does need to be researched because of course you see the situation that happened in South Africa, the xenophobia and
yes, yeah,
everything like that with the beef between the migrant workers and the domestic South African workers. So it really would be interesting to dive into
so it's quite a
into
complex, answer. This one to do with illegal immigrants and trade
yeah,
unions.
because it's difficult for you to even join a trade union as an illegal migrant because you know what I'm saying, because by definition you're not supposed to be here. So how
Yeah,
are you supposed to get represented? How are you supposed to get, how are you're supposed to, like, it's difficult to represent someone that's undocumented.
exactly. Mm.
Yeah, so it's
So diving in further into this whole issue of legalization,
Yeah.
does it, especially, I think in your paper you mentioned that it's happening in some parts of the US.
Mm,
So how does this, the issue of brain drain will always come up when it comes to African migrant labor and
mm,
African migrants
mm.
moving to more developed places, and sometimes Africans moving to more developed African countries.
Mm.
So what does this mean? What is the actual legalization process? And do you think it has an impact on the brain drain from Africa and maybe the developing world in general?
Wait, sorry, could you repeat that? Sorry.
Basically, what's the legalization process and how is it impacting brain drain from Africa? Because if you're an undocumented immigrant,
Mhm.
you are legalizing. Some would argue that legalization encourages undocumented immigrants,
Yeah,
and
sorry. Yeah, I mean,
one, yeah,
in my opinion, I think it encourages it because from what I saw, there was one statement I read. There was a quote, I forget by who, but they said that every legal way creates an illegal way.
okay.
So
Every legal way creates an illegal way.
illegal, yeah, every legal channel creates this illegal channel for migrants. So like for example in the US, there, when you make it more legal, like more people, it's just going to encourage more people to want to even come. You understand? So it's like Africa is already, first of all, Africa is already losing from the brain drain. I think someone said 30. I can't remember the numbers, but yeah, like Africa is already losing to the brain drain. And then you create a program that's supposed to legalize, like people, is just going to encourage more people to even want to travel. For example, in the US, they've created this program called, I don't know if it's still running. It's called the H2A program. It's a
Okay,
program that tries to
it's
it
an
tries
immigration program.
it's an immigration program where people have this temporary, you have temporary, you're legal just for that period of time where the farm worker basically needs you. And
So
then
basically, it's tailored to make you legal according to the farmer's needs.
precisely, so because like, yeah, basically because farmers just basically, they need, when they need the workers, they need them urgently, and then when they don't need them, and it's not like they don't really they don't really care
Well,
about that whole.
it's kind of like that seasonal thing that you mentioned, but
Yeah.
legal way, temporary legal.
Yeah, yeah, you're only
So
there temporarily, but of course, like some people figure out a way to just maybe run off or
extended or something.
extend, yeah, like run off and do this sort of thing. But the interesting thing is, I don't know, maybe we'll talk about it later, is that it's actually, illegal immigrants find it hard to find employment even after they're legalized.
Why? Why is that?
Yeah, I don't. I also don't know. Like I was just reading about that somewhere, but it's. But yeah, back to the question. Sorry, I can go on tangents.
Fascinating. I was going to ask
Yeah,
even more
back.
because I mean, this question's floating now.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because their experience is undocumented, so it's not recognized. I don't know, or
Mm,
it's just a stigma. Who knows?
yeah. Who knows?
Yeah, we
Mm,
could we could if anyone has any interesting questions on that, you can email us on
yeah.
africaforDummies@gmail.com and we can maybe expand on that later. So going
Yeah.
on to the next question rather. This is actually the sixth one.
Mm,
You're talking about we're now getting into the legalization and these immigration policies.
yep.
Um, so I'm fascinated in the ways in which limiting or restricting migrants is applied. You said in your paper that limiting or restricting migrants won't do much benefit to domestic documented workers.
Mm,
How so? Because normally the anger is we should stop the wave of illegal immigrants coming in and getting our labor,
mm,
and you say that won't work, and then you also say
mm,
restricting them as well
mm.
won't work. So it's like
Yeah.
everything. Is it just a complex answer?
Yeah. It's as I said before, like everything, and like most of the stuff in migration is quite complex. But for the farmer, first of all, farmers like illegal immigrants because they do because illegal immigrants do show more participation, employment participation than domestic workers tend to, and
Uh-huh.
also illegal immigrants, like as I said before. the farmer basically dominates. Like he's everything, So like they hold on to the passport. I don't know if that exists in America and Europe, but in South Africa it does. They hold on to the passport. They have full control. So there's no absenteeism. Everything that the farmer says goes, you know, there's not you get what I'm saying. So they do enjoy, what do you call this? They enjoy they prefer illegal immigrants, of course, and also the fact that there is no minimum wage per se and that sort
So
of.
this benefits the employers more than so you because we're
Mhm,
looking at how illegal immigrants say for example, if we look at limiting them,
mhm,
if we limit how many illegal immigrants come to a particular country,
mhm,
how does that affect the domestic workers?
mhm. That by itself is I think the question should be like, how does it help them? Because they don't necessarily, like, if you limit the number of illegal immigrants coming into agriculture, you're not going to see this surge in domestic labor coming to work in agriculture. You see, because remember already it's dirty, it's degrading, and
No one
it's
wants to do it.
no, but not many people want to work in this field. The wages are low. It's
Yeah.
dangerous. You're working outside. It's dirty. It's, as we said, degrading. All those things, and also like I was reading a paper that about three-quarters of the youths in Uganda would take a desk job if they had if they had three-quarters of the youths that are working in agriculture
So
would take.
normally the people that are documented prefer not to have agricultural jobs.
Oh, sorry, no, that one I was just talking about, like in general, like people who
I
are
see.
working, like these are legal citizens of the country that want to, so just to show you that even the people that are there, they don't necessarily, it's not their dream. For some
Yeah,
people, it's not,
the dream
for a
job.
significant number of people, it's not their dream job because of the nature of the job. And also it's very volatile. Like it's not necessarily, you know, as flashy as working for a tech company or this sort of
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, this sort of a
the
thing.
pay as well is also
Yeah,
kind
so it doesn't necessarily, you're not going to see this significant number of domestic workers lining up at the farm saying, "Oh, finally they've limited the number of immigrants. Now we can, I mean, illegal immigrants. Now we can finally start working that." So
which is funny because people get very emotional about the fact that there are lots of illegal immigrant workers working. Most of them go
yeah,
to culture, but
yeah.
in your paper, you basically explain that even if they're not there, people still wouldn't get those jobs. So
They
they
wouldn't
still,
necessarily jump at the you know what I'm saying. And then also the other thing is if you limit or make it difficult, basically like sometimes you increasing the penalty for hiring. That America has put in some penalties for work farmers that employ illegal migrants. If you increase the penalty, that can limit uh that can restrict people from hiring some migrant workers. But the other way is that people just tend to go more into they just mechanize. Like they'll try to figure out ways of mechanizing, which is another option for
so they
farmers
do
to
away
do.
with the whole problem.
Yeah. Otherwise, the other way is just to continue to figure out another way to get illegal migrants back into, which is hard by itself. It's very difficult to to restrict, you know,
Yeah.
immigrant migrants from coming into your country. Like it's even I remember people talking about. I think it was one of these news outlets that went to interview the middlemen in Mexico when they were talking about the war, the Trump war, and I was so shocked to hear the middlemen were happy. They were like, yeah, 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 the war. Oh, dude, we love the war, man. We
They're
love the war.
funding the war.
Yeah, because they're like, dude, all it does is it just makes we just hike up our prices.
Yeah.
That's all we do. We
Money
just
for them.
it's more money for us, and because we have to tell them, look, it's become more difficult, and that sort of a thing. So it's it's just really it's really interesting to see. I
Yeah.
also think that some of the negative perception can come from the change in demography demography
Demographic.
yeah, demography, yeah, because like when migrants come into an area, like it changes, like people, it changes the culture, it changes things like that. And one reporter once said that in Spain there was I forget the name of him, ill something. There was the like he I don't know if or something. I don't know what if his take would should be taken as the be all end all, but he was saying that there were policies that they put in the town to push out migrant workers to the outskirts of the city because they were trying to prevent them from colonizing their city.
Ooh, big word. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it I don't know how true that is, but yeah, so you
You
could
hear that quite a lot when there's a big wave of a change in. Oh, I found the name by the way. It's El Eg
el
Ejido.
hilo, el hilo,
El Ejido.
el hilo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, that's an interesting one because when demographics start to change and people start feeling it,
Mhm,
even though it may be inflated,
mhm,
and the political tension might stoke it up, it sort of starts causing more problems,
mhm,
and politicians have to do something about it.
mhm,
Which brings me to our last and probably the most extensive question, which was also the most fascinating for me, because it's looking at the political aspect and how is the discrimination and politicization of illegal migrants affecting legal migrants, and how do governments in Africa and Europe respond to this? So we can start with South Africa, for example. Before you
uh,
speak, just
yeah.
hold that. I just want our listeners to know that in South Africa, according to the South African Statistical Office, from the Mail and the Guardian uh, media house in South Africa, as of 2015, 500,000 to 1 million people were predicted to be undocumented migrants. And many of them are
Wow.
from regional African countries and just
Mhm,
general Africa.
mhm,
And I think many people know about different bouts of xenophobia in South Africa. And normally, the perception and reasons for xenophobia is that xenophobia is people are taking over and overwhelming South Africa's labor market. But when you look at the statistics, 3 to 4% of South Africa's population is either a migrant legally or illegally. Whereas in the US it's 11, in the UAE it's 80%. So
wow.
some of these things, it feeds into the political and cultural fears that seem to be inflated. So
Mhm,
yeah, just let's just expand on this question. Once again, what are the political connotations? What are governments doing about it? And how does it
mhm.
affect even the legal migrants?
Yeah, I think it does because as I said, I think before, I think this is where this was mentioned that it's difficult for illegal migrants, even when they become legal, to find work because of the discrimination that exists against the migrants that come in. So it's like no matter as I said also before, that in that Spanish town, they basically saw that there was a lot of change occurring. Like, oh, people, different people are now coming in. Let's do what we can to, you know, ensure that our town remains what it, you know, what it's always been. That sort of
The cultural
the
originality,
cultural, yeah,
or
exactly.
the more racist term, cultural purity, as though there's actually anyone that is purely of one culture.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, it's like, how humans are, like you just see one person from a certain community doing this and you just paint everybody. If it's frequent enough, you just paint everybody like, oh,
Hmm.
these guys are like this, that sort of.
It takes a small minority to paint a large picture.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it could affect in that, and also perhaps maybe also some violent things that have occurred to, as you said before, the xenophobic attacks that have occurred. So maybe the politicization and discrimination that could be um one of the.
Yeah, that's actually interesting because South Africa has a long history to do with land. Of
Hmm,
course, there's that issue to do with the land
hmm,
reform,
hmm. Huge
land
issue. Huge issue.
appropriation, distribution, whatever you want to call it, land
Hmm,
reform, and how it's also intertwined in the agriculture,
hmm,
uh, legal immigrant issue, and xenophobia. It's sort of linked because
hmm.
you can see there's xenophobia towards, and I saw this documentary. I forgot which news agency it was. I don't want to name drop, uh, just in case. Like, oh,
Hmm.
this yeah. So you have, say, for example, Zimbabwean farmers going into South Africa in Limpopo, which is the northern and most northern province in
Hmm,
South Africa, and working for farmers who own large tracts of land who predominantly are white.
hmm,
And then you have a situation where people these because of, as you said, the advantages of hiring undocumented migrants.
Mm-hmm.
You can have them almost at your behest. They're
Mm-hmm.
legally slaves to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then they also mingle in the community. So you have illegal immigrants leaving a country of instability, going to South Africa for greener pastures, but living under different conditions, under an inherited apartheid system where land is
Yeah.
predominantly owned by white people. And then
Yeah.
those people are normally living in the low density,
Though
most
very, yeah,
areas of
very
South Africa.
rural, very rural
Yeah.
areas. Yeah.
So now, when one person sparks one flame of xenophobia, those
Mm-hmm.
guys are probably the ones with the jobs for
Yeah.
various reasons because they're undocumented immigrants. And
Yeah.
then, yeah. But then, of course,
Yeah.
there's also very, well qualified, high skilled South Africans who are teaching, doctors, professors in who have migrated from other parts of Africa. Those
Mm-hmm.
guys will be affected.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You
Exactly.
can, you can kind of draw the line all over because
Mm-hmm.
most people complain and say, why are you venting your anger against black Africans who never were the cause of apartheid? And of course, it's of course wrong to vent your anger against anyone. That's not the way you deal with things. But I guess the anger is vented against them because they are the closest in proximity to them because they're mostly in low
Yeah.
density areas. They are both in very poor situations because of the high levels of inequality,
Yeah.
and they are the ones they appearing to get the jobs because
Yeah.
of the advantages of being an undocumented
Yeah,
migrant.
because undocumented migrants are willing to take the lower wages because
Yeah,
of the income differentials and also like the
yeah,
differences in their what do you call this again, the currency, that sort of a
yeah,
thing. So it's like for undocumented workers, they're willing to take those jobs and they're willing to work like crazy 10 hours plus sort of things, whereas a South African person may not be willing to do that. I mean, of course, like you're not,
yeah,
I'm not trying to say it's a bad thing not to ask for that, but for the farmer, it's like, oh, this person, if I was to do the thing, you can't necessarily hold the same control with them because they have so many legal um, channels to follow if you do anything. And whenever the government tries to mitigate, they try to increase wages, for example, so that maybe it can encourage. But again, for
but
farmers,
then again, you could also say when the government increases wages for
mhm,
farmers, this is
mhm.
undocumented. This is documented farmers, right? They're
So
increasing.
document yeah. So when farmers try to increase the wages for just the minimum wage, when they increase the minimum wage, you're basically going to see shedding off of workers because
More undocumented
yeah,
workers laid off.
actually the documented, like any unskilled labor that's there, just they just try to cut off as much as they can. And actually, one of the worst positions you can be in is just be an unskilled farm labor. Like that's one of the worst positions because from some of the literature that I've seen, it's like there's a change coming in the sense that technology is increasing, right? It's becoming better and all these sorts of things. And right now, people are working on they're working on ways to make agriculture more efficient, more just
Matter.
yeah, smarter. Yeah, exactly. Smart, everything like that. So if you're unskilled, basically you don't have that much education, and this comes in, like, what are you going to like? There's not once this technology comes in, they're just going to say move over,
Yeah.
and skilled workers are the ones that are now just going to be more or semi-skilled workers are the ones that are going to be, because right now they're already seeing it because agriculture, I mean, South Africa is more export oriented in terms of agriculture. So as it's exporting, these other countries have got their own certifications and standards.
Yeah.
So farm workers have to be able to understand that, oh, don't do it like this, do it like this because the customer wants it like this. If you're not able to at least read and write, like it's already a challenge for you. So yeah.
So it's funny because you've mentioned that when they increase wages and if you are illegal but unskilled
Mhm,
laborer in the
mhm.
agriculture industry and they increase wages, you probably be the first victim.
Yeah, going to be for sure. For sure.
For the
Where else
things
is it
like
going to cut off?
undocumented migrants. And then on the other hand, it's also becoming a competition of unskilled, undocumented. There's so many uns here.
Yeah.
Unskilled, undocumented uh, migrants
Mhm,
against mechanization.
Yeah, for
Like a
them
competition between
it's
those two
yeah,
now,
for
because
sure.
even the documented ones are now like they are the third ranking when it comes to competition. They're not even in the running. It's
Mm-hmm.
between machines and undocumented
Yeah,
migrants.
and undocumented migrants, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then like when it comes to the response, like Europe has basically been trying to figure out like, oh, what's the main cause of this? Because Europe has had this migration. I don't know if you can call it a crisis or
Yeah.
what, but they've really
2015 was massive,
yeah,
massive
20
immigration crisis. Yeah, that
precisely.
changed the whole political atmosphere at one point.
Yeah, precisely. And it's become a huge, huge issue. So Europe has been trying to figure out what's the genesis, what's the thing that we can do to stop this from happening. And as I said before, like migration is so complex, like you can't just pin it down to one issue because the common thought is, oh, okay, well, relating it to agriculture the common thought is, oh, let's go into these communities, these rural communities, we improve their agriculture systems, therefore they're not going to want to migrate. But that actually does the opposite, you know?
Mm.
You go in, you improve the agriculture system, quite all right. Those farmers start earning more money. But what they'll do is, what's going to happen is when those farmers earn more money, they start spending money on these non-farm goods. So
Yes.
they go in, they start buying these things that benefit other industries within that country, which will in turn improve the other industries within that country and even make them more attractive. So what tends to happen when you improve the incomes of farmers is you're going to see more migration. You're going to see people leaving because the other industries are still more
Only to
attractive,
the agricultural sector. Yeah.
yeah, than the agriculture sector. So it's very difficult to just say, okay, let's go in and just improve the the rural situation. Let's make farmers start making more
It's very
money.
much a
But
multi-sectoral
yeah,
approach,
very. I
because
mean,
everything is sort of thinking society, economy, and then the politics,
yep.
and then even the agriculture industry. There's so much diversity. I didn't even, I had no idea.
Yeah. I mean, they. I think there was one. I think the International Fund for Agriculture Development. I hope I didn't butcher that. If I, I'm hoping I didn't butcher that. But they came up with an idea called the District Value Chain Committee,
Okay.
and it's basically where they try to ensure that all the value created by these rural communities is captured. So they improve the communities. Basically, they improve the communities, the rural communities, because sometimes when most of the time when these people are farming, they don't see the benefit. Like the agriculture products are basically taken, they take a low wage, and that's
Yeah.
farmers themselves don't get that much money. So based on like the dollar for every dollar that they, you know, for every dollar that's spent on an agriculture product, the farmer gets very very little.
We can wrap this up by
Yeah.
asking you if they, as we normally try to do it, and anything on that
Hmm.
note, I'm hoping. What do you think is the best way to? Do you think agricultural labor in general is doomed because of mechanization? Because initially this was a conversation on migrant labor,
Yeah.
but now we're talking about mechanization.
Mhm.
So, do you think there's a space for illegal immigrants to be legalized in the countries that they go through, that they go to, or should um, are there other ways of dealing with it? And also, if you could say something on mechanization, what do you think the future is when it comes to mechanization?
Okay. With regards to the legalization, I'm not too sure about that because as I said before, it's a very very complex issue. So I don't know if I don't know how to deal with that. But with mechanization, mechanization is coming, and I think that a lot of African governments should prepare for that because
Many
as I said,
African governments with the Africa Free Trade Agreement are sort of reconfiguring themselves towards agriculture again as a key industry. Yeah,
I haven't yet actually read that part.
yeah, no, but that's the general
Any
theme. Yeah,
yeah, any dog. But like whenever you're talking in Africa, no matter what government, they'll always say the same thing. We need to go into agriculture. We need to go into agriculture. We need to go into agriculture. It's like it's just it's a broken record at this point. It started from like for a long time, for a very long time, it's the same thing. But I don't think I think I think we can be a bit passive, and even like looking at the methods, our agriculture methods, some of them are very, very behind. And even in terms of mechanization, like the in terms of tractors, like we don't really have a lot of tractors in or should I say a lot of fields that are harvested by tractors, that sort of a thing. So, but I do think that it's definitely going to it's definitely going to come. People are working on it. People are working on figuring out ways of basically removing people from the agriculture production.
Sounds like unemployment.
Yeah, yeah. So if you don't necessarily prepare yourself for the because a lot of I hope this doesn't even create another conversation. Like a lot of when you look at the undocumented workers in South Africa, I mean not undocumented, sorry, the uneducated, most of them tend to be black
Yes.
in South Africa. So and these guys are in the most vulnerable one of the most vulnerable positions because as I said before, if like once mechanization improves or once mechanization becomes at least cheaper enough because generally in agriculture the adoption rate for innovation tends to be low because generally because of the price, it's if something's not they're not able to afford it, they'll still use the other methods. So if the innovation they just figure out a way to make it accessible for multiple farmers, then it's going to provide a challenge for them because you're uneducated. How are you going to drive a tractor? How are you going to operate this system?
They should have ways of skills training to make sure
Yeah,
people are incorporated with the mechanization of
yeah,
because
yeah,
the
for
mechanization
sure.
seems unstoppable, but at the same
Yeah,
time,
it's
unemployment seems inevitable. So you have to
mm,
kind of stop unemployment because Africa is desperately in need for employment. The
mhm.
population is growing madly, youngest
Yeah,
population in the world, and then agriculture. We tend to be have an abundance of arable land,
terrible. Yeah,
but
yeah, mhm.
there seems to be an issue with actually securing the food that the arable land can produce. And
Yeah,
there's so many toes, as we mentioned earlier. South
mhm,
Africa, there are issues, the political issues with land reform,
mhm.
and also affected is, and this is another discussion to do with
Yeah,
Europe's notorious agricultural policy that's sort of
pushing guys in the
ruining,
outskirts. Yeah,
yeah,
mhm.
ruining some African markets. I don't
Yeah.
know if that has been revised or that has been changed, so I might be wrong. It's time to be
What
corrected.
is it? The common agriculture policy.
Yes.
I
Um,
think they still give direct payments, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, no, I'm talking about the effect on Africa in their imports of highly subsidized products into Africa, which sort of
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, no. I don't know about Europe, but
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
don't know. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't know if it has been revised. So yeah, all of this stuff is so widely connected, and
yeah.
we can close on an agreement that it is incredibly complex, and there's no full simplified answer to this stuff. So, yes, we are trying to be simplified as possible, but the simple answer is it's complex.
It's good.
The
Yeah.
simple answer is it's not simple.
Mhm.
So, yeah, on that note, I think we're gonna close off. And once again, thank you so much to our budding agricultural agri-tech expert, and our co-host Nathan.
Oh, thank
And
you.
once again, we are really appreciative for bringing us listening to us right now.
Yeah. Thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to follow, like, all those good things.